Welcome to Southern Gospel Journal. My name is Daniel Mount, and I have the privilege today to be talking with Chris White, founder of Sonlite Records. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good, Daniel. Hope you are.
I am, thank you. To the listener, I would say this is part two. We had an earlier episode where we discussed the early years of his story. I'll plan to link to that in the show notes and would encourage you to listen to that one first and then come back to this one. So we're picking up where we are in your story was the early days of solid gospel radio, which later became singing news radio. Could you share the story behind that? You know, what it was at the time that you became involved and your role in helping it grow?
Well, yeah, I was involved from minute one.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, if it hadn't have been for me uh, driving Maurice Templeton crazy about doing this, I don't know that it would have ever happened. And he was the guy I knew that we had to have to media-wise make it all come together. But anyway, long story short is I found out that there was a couple of guys in Sacramento, California that had started a digital radio network. Well, I wasn't familiar with that. No one else was at that time because this was early 90s. Uh, could have been actually late 80s when I first heard about it. But anyway, uh, digital radio, it just, I mean, I was not familiar with it. So I did a little research and found out basically what they were trying to do. And I thought, wow, the platform is built on creating a program log of Southern gospel music and its top artists, and radio stations across the country buying that signal, and the network would send it up to the bird, and then the station would buy a big dish and put it on their property and pull that signal down. And that way they could feed their network uh, 24/7 with Southern gospel music. And in that, it had all of the breaks built in automatically to where they could do their commercials because they still had to make money. And so we built all that in, or these guys built it in. But what they couldn't do was take it to the next level. They had a great idea, and I wish I remembered their names. I don't. I'd like to give them the credit for that idea. Uh, but anyway, when I heard about it through Carol Magruder's brother-in-law,
Hmm.
who knew the guys in
Hmm.
Sacramento. And so I called Maurice and I said, Maurice, we got something we need to look at here. Because I realized at the moment I heard about it, this could change Southern Gospel Radio
Hmm.
completely and give it first class 24/7 programming in any station that wanted to bring that signal down to earth to their stations. So
Yeah.
it took me probably 6 months to talk him into doing it. And finally, one day he said, you know what? I'm just going to fly out there with you and see what you're so excited about here and get it over with. That way you'll leave me alone. And I said, okay, well, if you'll do that, that's all I ask. Just go with me and look at it. He did. We spent the entire day with these guys. And that evening after dinner, Maurice and I were sitting by the pool at the hotel just talking about what the day had been. And all of a sudden, it was like he said, we've got to do this.
Hmm.
And he saw the vision of it. And so we immediately pulled some stockholders together because we didn't want to do it by ourselves.
Hmm.
We needed help with people talking about it, marketing, especially in the art space. But we rounded up, I think it was eight. Eight was the initial amount of investors besides me and Maurice. And we bought this network from these guys for a whole lot more money than it was worth because they didn't
Okay.
really have anything of value. They had 3 stations online, and that's all they could get, and they didn't have any equipment that was first class, reliable 24/7 type equipment. It might run for 2 or 3 hours and break. Uh, so we had to invest a lot of money in the front end as well on equipping a studio that was functional. But
Hmm.
we gave them a lot of money for the rights to that studio, which basically was giving them the money for the rights to the idea.
Yeah.
And then we owned the Reach Solid Gospel Network. And so we bought the idea. We didn't buy
Yeah.
equipment, etc. Come back to Nashville. I built the first 2 studios that network was housed in, and the first one was in Oak Valley. Uh,
Yes.
and it was a small studio in Oak Valley, but it worked. It's all we needed. And I hired a guy from Dallas, Texas, to be the original engineer, Derek Ferricks.
Okay.
And I went to the airport. Do you ever remember the name Derek Ferricks? I don't.
I
I don't
don't
know if you
believe
remember
so.
that far back. No.
No.
Uh, I went to the airport to pick up Derek. He flew in from Dallas, and I'd already hired him. I hired him over the phone. And when I went to pick him up at the airport, he come walking out of the terminal with a uh, big old cowboy hat, and cowboy boots, and I thought, "Oh my, what did I do here? What did I do?" But man, did he ever turn out to be a jewel, and he still is. I talk to him every now and then through different medias, but he just did a fantastic job for us. And then as time went forward, we hired 2 or 3 more guys in the DJ capacity, and then Maurice and his team of people were doing the marketing.
Yeah.
So I was doing the production side, Maurice was doing the marketing side, and that lasted for several years. And then a guy named Jim Cumby come along,
Hmm.
and Jim was a Disney guy, and he really wanted to be in the Southern gospel music world in some way. There was one time he even looked at buying Crossroads. He just wanted to be in the business. So he took a look at Reach, and that's what he said. I've found what I want to do. So he bought, and we let him buy 70% of it because uh, it was really a great idea to let him come in because he had such experience with Disney. We
Hmm.
thought he could take this to a level we probably never could. Uh, but when we gave him 70 or sold him 70% of the network, we were at, I think the number was 130 stations.
Okay.
So we grew it from 3 to 130 in that time period. That was probably over going on 2 years. And it was a slow go because, again, it was the format, it was the thing nobody had ever heard of.
Yeah.
Stations were they didn't know what we were talking about when we first told them about a digital network. So it took a while to be able to explain and market that to them to where they got on board. But when they did, they loved it because now they could do all of their programming they wanted to do. They could flip us on, flip us off, just like a switch. So it didn't bind them to us 24/7. They could just utilize us as much as they wanted to.
Yeah.
So it stayed that way. Jim eventually sold to Salem Communication out
Yes.
of California, and then Salem sold to Singing News Guys, the
Yeah.
current Singing News Guys.
the current Singing
and
News
that's where it's
guys,
at today, but they
which is kind
renamed
of
it
full
Singing
circle
News Radio.
because one thing we didn't say at the top here was
Which
Maurice
broke
Templeton was in charge of leading Singing News at the time.
yes, he was.
Yeah.
And it kinda broke my heart they changed the name, but,
Hmm.
but I understood why they did. I mean, it made sense.
I have a bit of a sentimental connection to the network actually in its solid gospel days because I grew up without any familiarity with Southern gospel. Borrowed a cathedral CD on a whim from the library in 2003. Got interested, and it was a local solid gospel affiliate where I learned about all the groups who were current, and they had it was a 96.9 WLRD Willard. They had some hours of local programming, but as I recall, some solid gospel hours too. And it was through
Right.
that I learned who all the major groups were. Who I ended up working with some of them not that many years later. So solid gospel was
Right.
a part of my story too, but
Boy,
from
that's
the other
cool.
side. Yeah,
That is very cool. Yeah.
yeah. So in part one, we talked about your time at Oak Valley Studio, and we talked about how much work you put into building it. But one thing I didn't ask was what you did there.
Uh, like anybody else at that stage of a new business, I did everything.
Hmm.
The garbage needed taken out, I took it out, you know? Uh, no, I was seriously kind of a jack of all trades.
Okay.
Of course, I had started the label at that point
Yes.
before I got there. So I brought the label in with me. It wasn't all that big a deal at the time when we first started, but uh, Kevin didn't have anything to do with launching of Sonlite.
Yes.
He had a company named Nashville Teleproductions,
Okay.
which which was that it was a production company, and so he and I partnered to rebuild and reopen, relight, as they say, Oak Valley
Yeah.
to the recording facility that it became. And I sold time. I mean, I would book groups. I did some engineering, not a whole lot of engineering, but I did quite a bit of producing.
Hmm.
So, like I said, I did a little bit of all of it. You know?
Cool. So then you've had you've been active in a number of different areas in Southern Gospel outside of just running a record company. We were just talking about the radio aspect. Another one of those areas that you've been active in through the years is publishing songwriters through Chris White Music Publishing. Can you share the story behind launching that and who are some of the writers you've worked with through the years?
Yeah, the way that was launched was basically having people say to me, "I've got this song I've written, but I don't know what to do with it, and I don't have a publisher." And that story kept coming up and up, and I thought, well, then maybe I ought to look at starting a publishing company.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how it happened. And I did. I started that, and that was just a little bit before the Oak Valley days as well. But it
Okay.
really didn't do much or take off at all until Oak Valley.
Okay.
And then it really got its attention. And I'll tell you what I did to really get that thing off the ground, Daniel.
Mhm.
Uh, I hired a guy that knew a lot about songwriting
Mhm.
and was quite a famous songwriter himself at the time, whose name was Ronnie Henson.
Oh my word! I did not know that.
Yeah, I hired Ronnie when they came off the road, and I found out several years later Ronnie hated that job because he wanted to be back on the road. He wanted to be on stage,
Yeah.
and I had him in an office
Yeah.
running my publishing company, and what we did was we would bring students in, and Ronnie would teach them the craft of songwriting.
Hmm.
And I remember the first girl that we really had a lot of success with was a girl named Marcia Henry,
Oh, yeah.
and she's still writing great songs today, you
She
know,
is.
and that was 40 years ago or whatever it was. So Ronnie worked for me for, I would say, a little over 2 years probably,
Okay.
and then he could not get the burning desire to be out in the
Mhm.
and sing again, you know, and
Yeah.
that's what he ended up doing, which I was okay with that. I mean, I gave him a place to land when
Mhm.
he had no home, he had nowhere to go, because that, the group, the instance kind of ended suddenly.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that was planned for a long time. And so Ronnie really appreciated that spot to light in until he could get his wits together about him and decide what he wanted to do with his life.
Yeah.
So it worked great for both of us. And then probably, most of the writers I had, Daniel, were one-offs. It's what I call
Okay.
one-offs because they'd have one or two songs that were strong, and that would be it, you know,
Yeah.
which is probably for the most part the way most writers are.
Yeah.
If you take how many writers have a big name value today, there's still not that many of them.
Yeah.
But the biggest name value I had was Phil Cross.
Yeah.
Uh, Phil was a phenomenal, phenomenal writer,
Yes.
and still is today. So he would be the person I would put at the top, uh, that really, when it came to the publishing side, as well as artist side with Poet Voices,
Yeah.
uh, he was probably the leader of the pack.
He had so many good songs in his early days, but then in those early Poet Voices days, it was one amazing song after another.
It was. Can I tell you a quick story about him?
Go for it.
We were in the studio, and this folds into Poet Voices. It's outside of
Sure.
the publisher so much,
That's fine.
but uh, his first big single that we released to radio under Poet Voices.
Mhm.
Uh, I called him and said, "Phil, I've got it mixed. It's ready to go to radio, but I want you to come in and take a listen to it,
Mhm.
and let's discuss anything that we need to before it ships." Because Phil had never had a single ship
Yeah.
off the label, and so he came in. He listened to the song. He was very quiet through the whole thing,
Okay.
and he looked very solemn as he was listening. And when it was over, he looked at me and he said, "Chris, you missed it.
Hmm.
You missed that mix." And I said, "Phil, I didn't miss it." I said, "That's as good a mix as I can get on it. It's great." "Nope, nope, it's not. You missed it." And I said, "Well," he said, "you're going to put me out of business before I get started." So I said, "No, Phil, that's a hit song right there. Just trust me, that's a hit song." And he walked out believing it wasn't. He walked out believing that I had really missed that mix, and he was not happy.
Hmm.
And that song turned out to be Jesus Built a
Did you just build
Bridge.
a bridge? Yeah.
Yeah. And from there, he just took off. And I've asked him sometimes through the years, I said, "Hey, you still think I missed that mix on Jesus Built a Bridge?" I won't let him forget it. But no, and his big one to me that really, really got in my gut every time I heard it was "I Am Redeemed."
Yeah,
And I'm telling you, I couldn't listen to that song without, you know, crying and squalling and shouting. It just was a song that just hit me every time I heard it.
yeah. It is an amazing song. You
Yeah.
know
And
what?
"Champion of Love," by the way, by The Cathedral,
Mhm.
that wasn't a bad song either, you know?
No, it wasn't. He had, "Miracle in Me" by the Greens, "Medals, Crowns,
Yeah,
and Trophies" by the Nealons.
yeah,
He's had so many just amazing songs through the years, some of which, everybody knows "Champion of Love" still, but how many
right.
people remember "Medals, Crowns, and Trophies"? Uh, he's
Probably not a lot. No,
but it was a good song.
it was a good song.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just talk about Phil Cross for another minute or two while we're here, and then we can loop back to songwriting. When did you meet him? How did that relationship start? Because you ended up working with him and with Poet Voices for a good long while.
It was a long time, Daniel, but you know what? I cannot tell you exactly how our paths crossed for the
Okay.
first time. I know it involved Elmer Cole
Mm-hmm.
in
His
Chattanooga,
mentor.
Tennessee.
That was his
Huh?
mentor. That was his
Yeah, it was.
songwriting mentor. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And we were in Elmer's studio in Chattanooga
Mm-hmm.
up on Signal Mountain, I think it was.
Mm.
And that's where I met Phil, I think for the very first time. Well, it may not have been the first time, but it was close to it. And that's where our relationship kind of began, I guess, at that point. Uh, that's the most I remember on where we started forming a relationship, where we actually met for the first time. I am so sorry, but I just
No
don't remember.
worries. No worries. So did he come to you with the idea of forming Poet Voices as a group? Because of course, for 8 or 10 years before that, he was well established as a songwriter, but really
Yes,
only as a writer. So did he come to you one day and say, I'm thinking about getting a group together? Were you
yes,
okay? Yeah,
yes. That's exactly what he did, and we put a really, really good team of people around him, uh, booking agents and managers, and because that's kind of the way Phil was. You know, he wanted good people around him, and he just refused to do it any other way.
yeah,
So we put that good people around him, and they all did a good job and worked hard for him. And it turned out to be a phenomenal career. He's still going strong today, you know. So
yes.
Phil was one of those artists that I would say was one of the hardest artists I ever had to work with.
Hmm.
He was tough to work with because he was so sold out to excellence.
Yes.
And he didn't want anything that wasn't excellent.
Hmm.
Uh, and neither did I. But a lot of times, one's uh, theory about what excellence is a little different than the next person. And sometimes we clash a little, but most of the time we were on the same page. And I appreciated his desire to do it right. And that's sure enough what he had. And yeah, we were together for many, many, many years. Yeah.
While we're talking about songwriters and songwriting, you've done some songwriting yourself. And didn't you write "When It's My Time," a song that the Crab family recorded and I believe even sent to radio?
I did, and there's a story behind that too. I don't know if we have time for it, but
Let's go
it
for
may
it.
be one of the best ones. It may be one of the best ones out of my uh, one of the better ones of my career as far as the way it all worked out. Crab Family heard this song, from a, custom group that recorded it, a group from Alabama recorded it, and they sent it to radio.
Mhm.
And wouldn't you know, I mean, out of nowhere, this group charts my song. And I don't think anybody had ever heard this group before, but they did a great job on it, and it charted. Well, Gerald Crabb called me at the office one day, and he said, "Chris, you wrote a song called 'When It's My Time,' so and so recorded, and we'd like to." He said, "I'd like to maybe look at cutting that song." And he said, "Would you send me a demo of it?" I
Hmm.
said, "Sure, Gerald, I'll send you one." Well, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that, Daniel, because the Kraft family was hotter than a pistol at that
Mhm.
point. Gerald was writing one number one song after another number one song. And honestly, I just didn't do what I should have done. I didn't send the demo because I didn't take it serious enough, I guess.
Hmm.
A couple of weeks goes by, and he called me back and he said, "Chris, did you ever send me the demo of 'When It's My Time'?" I said, "No, Gerald, I didn't." I said, That's my fault. I'll get it out to you today." But I said,
Yeah.
"Gerald, I have to ask you. I've got to ask you this question. You're writing number one after number one after number one. Why would you want to record a song I wrote?" And that was 3 or 4 years ago at that point, I guess.
Mhm.
And, he said, "Well, I'll tell you why." He said, "I was working in a garage, and, I think it was a body shop, maybe. And anyway," he said, "our owner played Southern gospel on the radio all day." And
Hmm.
he said, "Back when I first heard this song," he said, "I was working on my job, and this song come on." And he said, "It caught my attention." And he said, "Especially one line of it." And that line
Mhm.
said, "Imagine millions upon millions. They're all standing in line, waiting for a moment or more of the precious Savior's time." And
Mhm.
he said, "When I heard that line," he said, "I realized I wasn't gonna be standing in that line." So he said, "I laid my tools down. I went out back of the shop. I got on my knees and I started praying."
Hmm.
And that was what was the beginning of bringing him to the Lord,
Wow.
was that.
You
And
just
I
never
thought,
know the impact.
you never, ever, ever know. And there was a couple of more things that happened for him at that same time, which, when things like that happen, it's a God thing,
Yeah.
but that song did it. That song did it. And that one line, particularly in that song, is what did it for him. And what did he do? He went on to write how many number one songs and perform all over this country with his family. And, for a long time, and I still will, if I next time I see him, I'll ask him again. I keep saying, "Gerald, consider all those number one songs you wrote because my song convicted you to get right with the Lord. When are you gonna send me some royalties?" But he would always say, "Brother, your royalties have been stacked up in heaven." So, and I'll take that. you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was my biggest, song ever. It went to number 2, and the McCameys, my own group, beat me out of getting my first number 1, uh, by jumping the Crab Family and going to number 1 in the charts, and we got stuck at number 2, so I never have written to number 1, because of that. But I used to write a lot, back in the earlier
Mhm.
days, 80s and 90s, especially. but when I got into, running the company and the record business and everything else that was going on around me in the industry, I just didn't have the creativity about me to write like I once did because my mind was so scattered everywhere. Uh,
Yeah,
and to write good songs, as a writer, you gotta be focused on what
yeah.
you're doing. And I just wasn't, for me for a long, long time. So, I've let my publishing be my, I guess, feel-good part of the lyric world since I don't write much anymore, but, yeah, back in the day, I wrote quite a bit, several top 40s.
There was one other one I wanted to ask you about specifically because it was on such a landmark album, and that was the song Love Bigger Than Heaven for Gold City, which was on their
Yeah,
Windows of Heaven album, which was just a huge album for them in those days. Do you
yeah.
do you have any recollection of writing that song or any interesting stories connected to that one?
Yeah, I do, and, the first group to cut it was the Wistnits.
I don't think I
Uh,
knew that.
they
That's
cut
cool.
they cut it before Gold City. Matter of fact, Gold City heard the Wistnits do it,
Hmm.
and that's when they picked it up.
Okay.
So it's actually started with Wistnits, and then Gold City picked it up and did it. Mike LeFevre did the lead on it, uh, and did a great job. And yeah, I guess that was the most proud I had been of a song because that was my first major, major artist on a major, major record that had one
Yeah.
of my songs on it. Uh, so I was really excited about that.
Yeah.
And you know, I've never ever forgotten, that was I guess, you've heard the old saying, "Claim to fame." That was my first claim to fame as a writer,
Yeah.
was, uh, Love Bigger Than Heaven.
Were there any songs that I didn't ask about that really stand out in your mind as one worth mentioning here or one that has a really cool story connected to it?
No, not really. Those are the 2
Okay.
that I would say stand out the most because of what they represent. Both of them had their own little representation of what they stood for. I was pretty much one of those one-off writers too. I never
Mhm.
did write enough big hits to become known as a writer. So I never was really known as a writer, except for people who dig in the weeds like you do.
Definitely, that's me. All right, I
Yeah,
think I want to
you
ask one more question that's really business oriented, and then maybe we can wrap up this episode with a couple artist related stories. So, one thing that we've started talking about in bits and pieces, but haven't tied together as much is, we talked about the early days of Sunlight in the 80s in episode one, in part one. But then as we move into the 90s, Sonlite Records and Eldridge Fox's Horizon Records started taking steps toward becoming Crossroads. But if I recall correctly, it wasn't like a sudden merger, like with some joint distribution that led to a full merger later. So, for to kind of wrap out the behind the scenes portion of this part of the story, um, could you share the story of how Sunlight and Horizon um, started working together and then became Crossroads?
Yeah, but if I can backtrack just for a second,
Sure.
I've noticed something when I watched the first episode.
Yeah.
We didn't even mention that the Hoppers had the first number 1 for the label
Oh,
and their
yeah.
first number 1,
Yeah.
"Here I Am." That
Oh,
was
that
their
was a good
first
song.
number 1, and yeah, and
Yeah.
and Claude would always say, "The Hoppers made Sunlight, and Sunlight made the Hoppers." And that's kinda true. That was,
Yeah.
but to lead to, Crossroads was I saw the opportunity for 2 labels that were doing really well, Sunlight and Horizon, to come together as as a partnership, not as a merger, but as a
Hmm.
partnership, and gain strength in distribution and radio. Because the more strong artists you had in distribution, the better. The more stores would be open to your products because they could get so much more major product on that one call, that one order. It just gave us leverage that we didn't have independently. Same
Yeah.
thing applied to radio. And we
Hmm.
both had our radio departments, and they were working. Sunlight was working Sunlight, and Horizon was working Horizon. Uh, but just to bring all that together made sense from a leverage point in the industry.
Yeah.
And so I went to them. The only guy I knew besides Foxy, and I'd met him one time, was Mickey Gamble.
Yep.
And Foxy had brought him to a guild meeting, and I met him there one day. And so I started kind of chasing on him because we run into each other at concerts a couple of times. And I said, Mickey, why don't you get me? His name is Mickey Gamble.
Hmm.
Mickey, get me a meeting with your guys, with your ownership, and let me pitch an idea at you.
Okay.
And that went on and on and on for 6 months probably. And he never would pull it together. And finally, and I can still see today the parking lot, the church, me and him sitting in the car. I can see it like it was yesterday. I said, I'm going to give you one more shot at this. See if you can get these guys to sit down, your ownership, to sit down and let's talk about this idea. And he finally did it. And when
Okay.
he did, then I went to Asheville, where
Yeah.
they were headquartered, and talked through the whole idea, the whole philosophy of the partnership, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, we come to an agreement to do that partnership, to merge both those labels together. So that now the Kingdom Airs and Karen Peck and New River was under the same representation. They
Yeah.
still had their separate labels.
Yeah.
Karen was Horizon, Kingdom Airs Sunlight, but they were represented by all of these now twice the staffing that we had before,
Yeah.
sales department, everything else. Uh, and that went on, uh, I'm trying to think how many years that did last now before Pamphlet Entertainment out of Portland, Oregon bought us. And that lasted for 5 years before they decided to get out of the music business. And they were in
Mhm.
all the music business. I mean, they were big, but they were a multifaceted company. And so he, for personal reasons, decided to shut down the music side. And then we bought the company back from
Yeah.
Pamplin. And that's, we still have it today. Did I leave out something? I feel like I left out something that I meant
Well,
to
actually,
include.
there's one detail I'm not clear on. So you started with joint efforts in radio and in distribution. Were
Yeah.
at the time Pamplin came into the picture, which I think was late 90s. At the time Pamplin's in the picture, are you still two separate companies working together on those fronts, or had you merged in to become Crossroads? Did Pamplin acquire Horizon and Sunlight in a sense, or did Pamplin acquire Crossroads that was already one unified organization?
Well, Pamplin acquired Horizon assets, Sunlight assets, and Crossroads, the umbrella asset.
Okay.
So we never ever merged the two labels as one company.
Okay.
We continue to be a partnership with Crossroads being the umbrella
Yeah.
for both. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think
Now,
it is. Go on, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say when Pamplin bought us, then it all came together under one roof and one ownership
I see.
by Pamplin.
And then when you bought yourselves back, it continued to be all together under one roof.
It did. We bought ourselves back in 2006, I believe it was,
Okay.
and there was, some of the original owners for Horizon and me, that was Jeff and Vicky Collins, and then Mickey, because, some of their main guy Eddie Swan was probably their, lead character, I guess you could say, at the time that the partnership come together, he and
Mhm.
Foxy, but Fox didn't do a whole lot with running the business. He was, too busy running the Kingsman. So,
Mhm.
uh, we held all the business activity within the confines of who was part of the Horizon ownership, and then myself, which I was by my I didn't have any partners in the Sonlite, so it was just me, and then when we bought it back, it was Jeff and Vicky, uh, bought a third of the company, Mickey bought a third, I bought a third, so we were all back together
Yeah.
just the way we left.
I think it is a real blessing for the groups that were part of the record company and for Southern Gospel's strength as a whole that you were able to get it back, because it's my understanding from conversations with Scott Wagner that the other divisions of Pamplin, I believe, all the other divisions just ceased operations of the Pamplin Music organization, and Crossroads
Oh,
was the only one that came out of that as an organization that continued to operate. And I think for the sake of the groups and the sake of the genre, I'm really grateful that you were able to work something out, and that Crossroads didn't just cease to exist when Pamplin did.
yeah, that's very correct, Daniel, and it's that thing shut down almost like over 24 hours. I
Wow,
mean,
that's
it
fast.
was 24 hours, but it felt that way,
Mhm.
and, it was for me, and even for you to a degree, because you were there long enough
Yeah.
to see where Crossroads started, and it started in my offices in
Mhm.
Nashville,
Yeah.
and I hired one guy as a sales guy, Mike Harrelson, who was a tenor singer that I had gotten a job before in the business, and I knew him, he was in Florida, not sure what he was doing, but I said, "Mike, you want a job, as a sales guy for this new company that we put together?" And he said, "Sure." So he moved from Florida to Nashville. I set him up a small office in my offices there in Nashville. I handed him a sales book with every retailer that we could put our hands on, and I laid it on his desk, and I said, "Sell all you can sell." And that was selling all the product, Horizon, Sunlight,
Mhm.
everything. And he did, and did quite well at it. And then eventually, as everything evolved, we just made the decision. It made more sense to move it all to Asheville, and that's what we did. Um, 93, I think, maybe,
Okay.
and then Crossroads was 94 when it was finally merged, or at least partnered, not merged. I used the wrong word. Uh, got the partnership alive and well, and the rest is history, as I say. Still going today.
Neat. All right, maybe we can talk about one or two artists, one or two more artists, and then wrap up for the night. And I think we're far enough in your story; we can probably wrap it up in a part three. Uh, so one that I definitely wanted to ask you about, because it was such a big thing for the genre at the time this happened, was that Southern Gospel is a very group-oriented industry, and there aren't many soloists who have really built strong, sustainable careers. but you really helped change that in Kirk Talley's Sunlight years. So I'm wondering if we could talk about Kirk's solo career for a couple minutes here. Both Kirk's career itself, but also Kirk really helped pave the way for the current generation of soloists, Mark Bishop, Ivan Parker, Joseph Habedank, and some others. So just curious, some of your insight in that.
Well, you're so right about it paving the way, and if you remember, at that time, NQC wouldn't even let a soloist on stage.
Yeah.
They were not allowed to perform, uh,
Yeah.
at NQC because they weren't a group.
Hmm.
Uh, but the thing with Kirk was he was a lot like Phil Cross. He was difficult to work with sometimes because he was so precise,
Yeah.
and he was so gotta be just right, kind of an artist.
Hmm.
And, they'll drive you crazy at the moment,
Hmm.
but you appreciate it after the fact. You know,
Yeah.
you you appreciate the fact they're that way. And Kirk was definitely that way, and talk about a writer. Oh
Hmm.
my goodness. That boy could write a song and still does. Uh, he was, in my opinion, though, on this, just my opinion, everybody's got their own. If you ask me to pick one single artist that checked all the boxes
Hmm.
every time they walked stage, it would be football.
Well,
It, and I mean from the performance, he knew how to reach an audience. He knew how to speak to their heart in ways that most artists do.
yeah.
And the songs he delivered to them were just amazing, amazing songs. And I don't know, he had it all. He had it all.
Yeah.
So I consider him, as you said, the trailblazer to the soloist today. Now I've got another great one right now, Martin.
Hmm.
That's a great, great soloist. I had Ivan Parker for how many years? We had him. He was one of the rising artists for 2 years probably after the Gold City days. And uh, so soloists became a force. Now you got Joseph and you got Scotty
Hmm.
Inman, Joseph Habedank. Uh, but Kirk was the one that led that parade. He was the one that he took the body blows out of Scotty,
Yeah.
you know, for the rest of them.
And you talk about songs he wrote. There's one song he wrote that made such an impact in his Sunlight years that people still talk about that song today, and that's "Serenaded by Angels." Do you
Serenaded
remember when
by
you first
Angels.
heard that? Do you remember when you first heard that song?
I don't remember when I first heard it, but I remember when I heard it and knew the impact it was gonna have. It
Mhm.
seems like I may have heard first time in his house, but,
Okay.
anyway, it was in the studio side of the production because then it all really came together,
Yeah.
and, uh, and you just knew it was, wow, it's gonna be such a huge song, and, uh, and we knew, the lady that the song was about and her
Okay.
husband as well, so that made it even more, special, uh and I'll tell you another song he wrote that I think was one of his best ever, and that was when he hung the moon.
Okay, yes.
That was another great lyric song that he did, but which there was so many. But "Serenaded by Angels" was going away his top top song.
Yes.
Yep.
Alright. I would like to, wrap up for today with, I think, a fun story, or one that's just a totally unexpected one. Um, one of the most unexpected things in the history of Crossroads was that you signed one of the legendary Harlem Globetrotters, Meadowlark Lemon, to a recording deal. How on earth
Right.
did that come about?
That came about through my brother-in-law
Okay.
who knew Meadowlark's son.
Okay.
Meadowlark mentioned to my brother-in-law, not Meadowlark, but Meadowlark's son mentioned to my brother-in-law that his dad would like to cut a gospel record.
Okay.
So my brother-in-law says, "Well, I know who can do that." So that's how it came to be, and, his name was, Bill Baker, my brother-in-law,
Okay.
and, Bill was big, big, big time in production business, and he ran into Meadowlark's son somewhere in a show, production show of some type, I don't remember what, but that's where he met him, so that was maybe the most interesting record I've ever done, Daniel. Uh,
Mhm.
he he was such a he was such a pleasure to work with, but,
Hmm.
he was difficult because his musical ability was not what his basketball ability was.
Yeah.
I'll say that. But, man, it turned out to be a good record, a really good record.
Mhm.
And, there's some stories that, if you ever wanna know any of those, 2 or 3 that just would, I'll never forget 'em experiences I had with him and to know what his ministry within himself was all about, and it was big. But
Well, if you have a couple more minutes, I'm happy to talk about Meadowlark another couple minutes here.
well, then I'll tell you a story that I thought was maybe there were so many we could pick about, but this one really spoke to his seriousness. We finished in the studio one night, and I was taking him to dinner. So I took him to this little restaurant down in, Asheville. There's uh, more of an upper scale, upper end type of restaurant, and, we went in and sat down. They set us at a table, just the 2 of us, and, you knew by the moment we sat down, it was gonna be trouble
Mhm.
because people started recognizing him right out of the gate, and I was a little surprised at that because he had aged some since his basketball days, but boy, he was still very recognizable,
Mhm.
and people started coming and wanting autographs and et cetera, et cetera. Well, the manager of the restaurant had to come in to the restaurant itself and make an announcement. "Folks, you have to let, Mr. Lemon enjoy his dinner with us tonight." And he basically told the whole place, "You gotta calm down here." You know?
Mhm.
Uh, and maybe the time will come after dinner that he can spend some time with you. And, but in the middle of that dinner, we're sitting there in the middle of that dinner, and the table right behind us, this guy leaned over to Medlark and he said, "Medlark, I don't wanna bother you, but," he said, "I just wanna ask you to say a prayer for my son when you have a minute," and told him a little bit about what the issue was and said,
Mhm.
"When you have a little time, just if you wouldn't mind, just say a prayer for him." Medlark said, "Well, how about right now?" And Medlark spun around, took that guy's hands, and prayed for him right there in the middle of all those people. And I
Hmm.
thought, wow, it don't get any better than that,
Yeah.
to see somebody of his magnitude not be ashamed to expose himself like that and just say, "Jesus, come down."
Yeah.
So that was a very cool thing.
That is very cool.
That's the best spiritual story I got on him.
You have a funny one?
He got his golf club stolen one night in a hotel.
Oh, no.
They busted out the roof of the car and stole his golf clubs. because they had his name on it.
Uh,
Uh, but anyway, he was a delight to work with, and the record turned out really good. We took him to Louisville, Kentucky, to NQC.
mhm,
Flew him in from Phoenix, Arizona, to Louisville for one night of NQC,
mhm,
and about halfway through the show that night, they took a little bit of a break on stage, intentionally took it, because we
mhm,
were gonna bring Metal Arc on. Well, the stage's clear, no artist, nothing but TMC, and all of a sudden, Sweet Georgia Brown started playing over the PA system,
okay,
and, that was Globetrotter's song, you know?
okay,
When people did that, and they saw this guy walking up on stage, and when they realized who it was, Daniel, that place went nuts.
yeah,
And the whole stand and clap for Sweet Georgia Brown. And we took when that part was over, he talked to the audience for a few minutes, and they didn't let him sing because he was soloist,
mhm,
but we took him out in the, arena area where all the booths were set up and everybody was
mhm,
selling the record, and their wares and goods, and we had, I think it was 2,000 basketballs shipped, the
mhm,
miniature basketballs
yeah,
shipped to Louisville, and we had guys, Jim Stover, who was
mhm,
one of them, throwing those basketball balls up as fast as they could blow them up, and
yeah,
we had, metal at the booth, and the idea was, if you buy the CD, for $20, you get the basketball free, autographed.
yeah,
Well, people didn't want the CD, they just want the basketball.
yeah,
So we had to say, "No, no, no, you either buy the CD or you don't get the basketball." And they did, and we were out of those we went through 2,000 people, in a heartbeat. So if we'd had 5,000, we could have sold.
yeah. I
But that
actually
people love
did. I recorded an episode with Jim a couple of weeks ago, and we ended up talking about that. One of the things that stuck out to him the most, because it was a long line. He said it was a long line,
Yeah.
but one thing that really stuck out to him was Dottie Rambo waited in line so she could get her basketball. Oh, that was funny.
Johnny Rambo, my mom.
Yeah,
My mom, that was her greatest gift in life, was that basketball. Oh, she loved it.
yeah. All right, I think we can wrap up here for the night. Thank you so much for your time, for coming on. I have definitely enjoyed this conversation.
I hope so, Daniel. I try to make it as, uh, interesting as I can without getting in the weeds, uh, and it brings back memories for me too, because
Yeah.
some of this stuff I haven't thought about in years and years. Uh, but it's been such a good and blessed career that God has given me, and,
Mhm.
I could just never thank him enough, and always amazed. I'm always amazed at how he's blessed me.
Yeah. Amen. Well said. And to the listener, I'll close by saying thank you for listening to Southern Gospel Journal. You can keep up with the latest episodes on YouTube, Facebook, your favorite podcast platform, or southerngospeljournal.com. Thanks for listening.